Welcome to the Be Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the She's Bold podcast. I really appreciate you being here and spending your time with me and with these amazing women who are willing to sit down and share their stories. I hope you're getting as much out of these conversations as I do because truly I thoroughly enjoy them. These conversations have enriched and affected my life beyond measure, and I feel so lucky to have this opportunity. This conversation today is amongst the most inspirational and touching that I've done. It's a longish one, and I really want you to hang on through this whole episode because there are some amazingly life-affirming stories here. This conversation is with Chris Fagan. Chris, along with her husband Marty, walked 560 miles over 48 days to the South Pole. They were the first married couple to successfully complete this adventure as an unsupported expedition, and that means they were carrying everything themselves. They were each pulling a 220-pound sled loaded with all of their food and essentials. Chris has a book coming out in September called The Expedition, about their journey, and that is available for pre-order, and I've linked to it in the show notes. In this conversation, we definitely touch upon their adventure, but we also dig into their many other adventures as a couple, and she shares some revealing information that will truly inspire you. Seriously, you are going to so love this conversation with this energetic, optimistic adventurer. If you do enjoy this and other conversations on the She's Bold podcast, please make sure you're subscribed in whatever app or program it is you use to listen to the show. And also take a moment to give it a quick rating or review. All of these help with the ranking of the show, which helps it get more visibility, which ultimately means the messages in these episodes find their way to more people. And that's what I am all about. I really want to inspire more people, get these messages out there, get these stories out there from these just incredible women. You can also support the show on Patreon by going to shesboldpodcast.com/Patreon. Becoming a supporter gets you access to bonus content, which takes the form of an additional question I ask the guest. In Chris's case, she'll let you in on what she's working on next. Again, this bonus content is only for Patreon supporters, and really, you can support the show for as little as $1 a month. Also, I'm working on another Ask Me Anything episode. If you have a question you'd like answered on a future episode, send me an email at beth@shesboldpodcast.com or leave a message at 877-280-5170. With that, please enjoy this conversation with Chris Fagan. You were just saying that you were in a cave for the past few years trying to get your book done.
Yeah, exactly.
I wish I had a cave.
Yeah.
Because I'm working on a book. And it is, like, I will tell you, I get so much done around the house when I'm writing my book.
No kidding, right?
Because there are so many more.
Wait, I needed to do that task. Right? Yes. Oh, well, there's only a half hour left now.
I know. It is crazy. So what was the process for you? Like, how did you commit? Because I need your tips. How did you commit to yourself to finding and carving out your cave? Because I know that you run a business too.
Right.
What's your secret?
Well, I don't. So I have a home office where I've been a consultant for many years. And so I go out and consult, right? And so I have this office in my home that I use for my business. And so I decided I needed to carve out a cave, meaning a totally different place. It had to be a writing place that was different and not distracting to my everyday business tasks.
Mm-hmm. But still in the house.
But still in my house. So I ended up converting my guest bedroom into my, sort of writing only. Nothing else happens in there except writing. So when I started, I would walk in there and really have that, oh my gosh, here I am in the writing place and I have to write. And each day it got easier and easier. And I just blocked on my calendar to make sure that I did that. But, at first I was such a novice. I didn't really know what I was doing. And, I crafted an outline generally and just started writing. And my process, I know every writing process is different, but my process ended up being what in that day was motivating to me to think about. And so I did not write in a linear fashion or follow the outline because...
Which is probably the way to get it done.
I just decided what story was speaking to me, what scene was speaking to me, because it's a memoir, adventure memoir. So it's very scene based. It's almost reads more like a novel, but it's a true story. Yeah, I would go, I really want to think about that day. I would look at a picture and I would ground myself in that day and just start writing and see what came out. So, I went through, I can't even tell you how many different edits and versions of this book.
Did you have a team of people working with you on it? Or when you say you had a lot of drafts or edits for it, were you just doing that yourself?
Yeah, I started out just doing it by myself and really had to move through those roadblocks of, I don't know what I'm doing. It's almost like starting anything hard, even in the physical world. It's like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm stumbling through it and I'm not being efficient. And I finally get it, to a point that's sort of okay. Maybe I'd like to share this with somebody. All of those things that we do. And I didn't really get the traction moving till I invited people in to help me. And it was such a lesson because it was the same with training for something hard physically. You kind of read books and you do it, and then you start talking to the experts and you just exponentially jump forward.
Are you a loner in general?
No. But maybe I had this idea that writers are, is a solo experience.
Well, and your bottle of whiskey, right? If you're going to take it to that.
Right.
It's like, that's really, that's the quintessential writer, is someone who's
tortured
tortured over a keyboard with a bottle of whiskey.
Right. So, my process evolved, and then I had a friend who was trying to do more writing, and she started a writing group. And so it was 5 of us women who were most of us were working on memoir and different kinds of memoir. And so that really helped because then we started sharing our work with each other every 2 weeks. And that was a great support network. And we all weren't professional writers for a living, but some of these women had a lot more experience than I. So I learned so much in the craft of writing from these women and, took some writing classes and learned some more craft, and then eventually hired an editor a couple different people that I found, went to some conferences, talked to more people, each step of the way, learning and crafting and, sort of feeling like I belong as an author.
How many years was the process for you?
And
the book is coming out in September. Is that right?
Yeah, of 2019 here. From the time that I got back until it's going to be out in the world is 5.5 years. But, I wasn't writing that whole time. I started writing and it was sort of fits and starts. And then my business would get really busy and then I'd craft some more time. And then my business would get really busy. And then I really just started buckle down. So I wasn't writing all of that time, and it doesn't have to take that long. But honestly, I think it unfolded in the most perfect way, because if I tried to sit down and write my book in 6 months or 1 year, it would not have the depth of insight that it does have. And I had a vision of a book that wasn't just, like a travel journal, day 1 through day 48 of the expedition. It is a lot of reflecting about how did I get here? And, how does this affect my family? And how about the community that came together around supporting my husband and I and caring for my son, and all these themes. And basically because I was sort of at midlife at the same time, it became a really introspective exercise of where have I been and where am I going?
Well, give us, before we get too deep into it, give us the title of the book and then just a brief synopsis of what it's about, because you mentioned the expedition. So what was that?
Yes. Okay. Well, the book is called The Expedition. 2 parents risk life and family in an extraordinary quest to the South Pole. The synopsis of the book is basically in the 2013-2014 time period, from mid-November through mid-January. My husband and I departed to Antarctica, and our quest was to go from the edge of the continent, where land meets ice, sea ice, to the South Pole. So it's 570 miles. We were just on our own, the 2 of us, which was a really big decision for us to not hire a guide and to do it on our own. And, in the process, it was a 48-day expedition, and we became the first American married couple to ever do such a thing.
And other people had done it previously. Were they solo? Were they guided? What was their status?
Yeah, there are various different versions of that, solo and guided. But at that time, there were only right around 100 people in all of history who had done unsupported, unguided, and unassisted trips, full expeditions from the coast to the South Pole. So we joined sort of this small group of polar people who decided, to try this kind of quest.
And you finished in 2014?
Yeah, January 18th, 2014, we arrived at the South Pole.
And have there been other people since then who've done it? I presume so.
Yes. Every season now there's a handful of expeditions that do this. So, since that time, there's been 5 years. So probably, another, 5-6 people per year, something like that. And there are definitely people that are trying to go solo or trying to break like records, speed records and different kinds of records. So yeah, for sure.
So the book took you about 5 years. And you know what? I have to tell you, that makes me feel so good because I'm not sure what year I'm working on, but I'm probably in year 3. And the most interesting thing, and I might be reading into this, or I might just be like right on in terms of how you described it. But what's happened for me in the process of writing, I think everyone should write a book.
Yes.
I really do. Mm-hmm. Whether they ever intend to publish it or not, because it has been such a journey inward for me. And as I write, I will write, and then I will have an experience. And having that experience, knowing that I might write about it, almost forces me to explore it more. And that's the fascinating part to me. It's like, oh, this is, I'm putting together why I'm doing this and how I was brought up in New Jersey. And that's something I could write about. And if I wasn't writing the book, I may not be paying attention to those things.
I completely agree. It really heightens your awareness and observation skills about life.
And yourself.
Right. About your behavior, about what you're doing and why you're doing it. I think that's how we should live anyway. But I think you're right. I think when we write about it, and we're forced to communicate on that level and bring it into our consciousness, then it becomes something more powerful for us, a powerful energy force in some way.
It's like epiphanies. And the thing is too, it's not even for me, I'm not even looking for them, or they're not even forced. It's just like, correct. Oh gosh, now I get it. I understand that.
Right. That's why, when I said, I'm glad in some ways it took this long, because there were a number of things that happened in my life in the moment that I was writing. In my personal life, related to my parents who were ill and different, they ended up passing away, my husband, and different life things that you start to see what you did and what you're doing through this different lens. And so it makes it a richer understanding.
And the fact that you're publishing the book has brought us here today too, which is also an interesting thing, because whether you sell one book or 100,000 books, the connections that happen because you made the choice to sit down and do that writing and publish it, put it out into the world, brought us together. So there's that interesting thing too of just what would life be like if you took the step to write it, but then you took the step to publish it, and it's two different things. And when you publish it, then it again, whether you make money on it or not, or it gets out into 100,000 people's hands or just 10 people, it's changed your life in a whole nother way.
That's right. And that's really, going back to the process, what keeps you going for that long? What keeps you going? Knowing, this book is still not done. It's kind of like, I trained for 3 years before going to Antarctica. You have this idea, you envision it, and then you have to put it into practice. And then you kind of are like, I'm not ready yet. I need to, and then you finally execute or implement. And same with the book. You have this idea and then you're starting on this path but what kept me going, getting back to that, point is imagining one person reading the book, just one. And I started with my son. I said,
what a gift.
I am doing this if no one buys this book for my son, so that he knows. He was 12 when this happened. He was 9.5 when we, thought up the idea. He was 12 when we were gone, and now he's 17. And to see him now reading the book through the eyes of a 17-year-old, it's just so fabulous. Yeah, and to know he'll always have that.
Does he think you guys are like the coolest parents in the world, or does he think, I don't know, does he think that?
Yeah, I don't know if he thinks we're the coolest parents, but I do know that he's very proud of us. So, I couldn't ask for more than that. I've heard him say that. He's gone to, when I go and speak and talk about our journey to audiences, sometimes I speak alone, sometimes I have my husband and we do it together because that's a nice dynamic for people to hear about. And then sometimes my son is there as well. To hear him, people want to ask him questions.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I bet.
Oh yeah. So, what were you thinking about your parents leaving you? And, what do you think about your parents? And he always says very positive things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. So the book, again, is coming out in September, and you get to kind of launch it out into the world at last. But you've been talking about your expedition for a long time. Let's go back and talk about what kind of led you to that initially. Just give me a little bit of background on yourself in terms of where you grew up, your family life, any early travels or adventures that you might have had.
So I am a Midwest girl, and I was born in Champaign, Illinois. Then in junior high school, we moved to Des Moines, Iowa. It's another version of Champaign, Illinois, basically, flatland, a pure Midwest kind of place. So, it's quite different than the Northwest as far as geography goes. And it's just wide plains, open fields. There's really not much contour to the land. There's not mountains. And so, it's kind of an interesting journey to get me here because I really feel like this is home.
When did you move to
I didn't move here until after graduate school, and when I got here, I just knew I wasn't ever going to leave. So,
did you come here for work?
I did. Yeah. So it was kind of the journey, the journey took me from grad school to, I took my first, professional job in Chicago and really loved living there in a big city right out of college. And there was a lot of activity and a lot of fun. But then, after 6 years of professional life and working for an advertising agency, that's when I was like, I think there's something more that I want, and I'm not sure what it is. And that's when I decided to take a 4-month leave of absence from my job. I had some friends who had done that, and I just was like, is so inspired by them. Wow, you can leave your job and go do something that you might want to do. And I asked for this leave, and I got
friends at your company.
Yeah, a friend at my company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it wasn't a policy that you could take a leave of absence, but I just took the leap of faith and said, okay, well, if I can't take that leave, then I might go ahead and leave the job. I was 28 and why not? So anyway, I ended up getting the leave of absence. But then when I came back, I just had seen so much. I went to the Cook Islands and then New Zealand and Australia and then up to Indonesia and Thailand.
Wow.
And kind of that whole circuit and then Japan and then back. So
you can't do something like that and not be completely changed.
And I was by myself, and it was a time where wasn't cell phones. And my mom, even though I was 28, my mom made me find a phone once a week to check in.
That was paying $3 a minute.
Oh my goodness.
I'm okay.
There's no email to just tell her. It was just funny. So when I got back to Chicago, I realized, I need to be somewhere. I am most alive and connected when out in nature and the beauty of the world that surrounds us. And so, I just decided to look for jobs either I just chose Colorado and the Northwest just kind of randomly, and was offered jobs in both places, and I decided to take Seattle. and it was a great decision. Yeah. So that is what brought me out here.
Yeah. Do you have siblings?
I do. I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So big-ish family.
Yeah. 5 kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And are they still in the Midwest?
No, my brother is outside Chicago, and the rest of us are scattered. Or actually, my sister moved to the Northwest about 15 years ago now. So she's here. We live like 10 minutes away from each other.
That's great.
My other sister lives down in Birmingham, Alabama, and my brother lives in Homer, Alaska.
Oh, wow.
So we're spread out, but we're a really close-knit family for sure. Yeah.
So you're the outdoor girl because you had mentioned to me previously that that you met your husband climbing when you were on Oahu. Is that right?
No, when we were climbing Denali.
Oh, Denali. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So he
somehow. Oh, he was working in
Hawaii.
In Hawaii. That's
yes,
what
correct.
It was. Okay.
Yeah, so we both decided to head off and do sort of the biggest expedition of our lives at that time. And I was a team of 3.
Totally separate.
Totally separate. Yeah.
He didn't know each other.
He was in
advance.
Hawaii at the time, and he was a police officer, and just was getting so excited about mountain climbing. And I was here, had moved to Seattle, and the way I integrated and started meeting people was to join the Mountaineers, and just thought I'd meet some cool outdoor people, and went through their climbing 1 and climbing 2 year-long classes. That was a great skill building process. Met some really great people and hooked up with these 2 women that were wanting to do this climb, and they invited me to join them. So we were just a team of 3 women, and we were self-guided, and my husband was a team of 3 men, and we just happened to arrive on Denali at the same time and started literally the same day, and kind of moving up through these camps.
And then how did you stay connected after that? Was it immediate? You're pretty cool, or did you just happen to kind of, dance around it and stay in touch?
Okay, so here is the amazing thing. As you were saying earlier, you make a choice and you move into that choice. And basically, I'm not exactly sure how it happened because it happened really quickly. Basically, we were climbing this mountain, and you're really focused. You're really focused on what you're doing. It's, it's dangerous. You want to be safe. And so, but there were times when we were stuck in camp for up to 5 days waiting out weather, and our tents would be sort of near each other. And so you'd kind of shout through to the other tent people and have a conversation because it's crazy windy and you don't want to go outside. And so we kind of got to know each other through that way. But it started out that Marty would say, "Hey, how are you girls over there?" And we would reply back. And then
were you in your own tent?
Yes, we were in our own tent. He's over here and with his teammates. And then a few days later or a week later, it would be, "Hey, Chris, how's it going over there?" And they would be like, "Oh, now it's just Chris," So it was just funny how that happened. But, we didn't have much conversation. We experienced this same event at the same time.
Yeah.
And I could see we had the same mindset and just love of quests and adventure and the outdoors.
What a great foundation for
it. Was a great foundation. Yeah. Neither of us convinced the other person to go do this thing with the other person. We were both doing it. So we got back to base camp, and Marty pulled my teammate aside and asked her, "Does Chris have a boyfriend?" And she said no. And he said, you just made my day, And then he had just pulled me aside and said, "No matter what, when we get back to Talkeetna, we're going to have a beer and a hamburger together at both teams, and we're going to celebrate." And so we both got back to Talkeetna, and literally that night we stayed up talking for hours and hours and hours and hours.
Oh, that's great.
And then we decided, he decided to change his flight, and so did I. And so we both had our little escape.
You stayed in Alaska?
For 1 extra day.
Aww.
Everybody else left. We stayed 1 extra day. And then after that, it was probably within a month he moved.
No kidding. That's fast.
He moved here. We were both in our mid-30s. We'd both seen the
When you
world.
know, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
How
and so
neat.
he just, it must have been within a few months he moved to Seattle.
Wow.
And then we were engaged like a month later.
Did your friends think you were crazy?
Not at all.
They knew. It was good.
Yeah.
Good thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
They could tell because of your response or because they met him and thought, "Oh yeah, this totally makes sense."
I think both. Yeah. And to see and to have a person that is so convinced that he's supposed to be with you to leave his whole life and say, you are more important than this life over here. Because this isn't
More important than Hawaii?
more important than Hawaii, more important than his police officer friends definitely were like, what are you doing? But he was for sure.
Oh, that's great. That's
Yeah.
a great story. So you have a business also.
I do.
And all this is going to come together, but for listeners, I want to kind of dive into the different parts of your world, because in a way they are very different, but somehow they all work. You've made them work together. So you have a business, Sparkfire.
I do, yeah.
And what is that all about?
Right. So Sparkfire is a consulting. We're a creative thinking and innovation consultancy. And so what does that mean? Basically, I came up through advertising world, and I have a business and marketing degree. And so within this advertising agency world, I was trained to run creative thinking and brainstorming sessions for all kinds of companies, Fortune 500 companies, that want to create new products, new services, new ideas, overcome challenges in their business. So had just phenomenal training in that. And then when I moved here, I decided I really want to do that as my business. And so another person I worked with back in Chicago and I started a business. That one was called Think Shop. It's pretty similar to what I'm doing now. And she was in New York, I was in Seattle, and we had this consultancy. And then as our lives changed, then I created Sparkfire. But basically, I help companies think creatively, and I run really these ideation and brainstorming sessions to come up with new product ideas, new service ideas to help their teams think differently. And then that really, people were in those meetings and said, oh my gosh, can you train my people to think like this and to use this for our weekly 1-hour staff meeting, and to just make people think about things in different ways, think about not problems, but opportunities to overcome. And so then I started doing trainings around that as well. And so that's what I do for my job. And, I work with a lot of large companies who have departments that are looking for people to help them do these kinds of things. I work with small companies sometimes as well, and nonprofits.
So you work from home. You have control over your days and your weeks and your months.
I do.
So and because you're on contract basis, I would imagine.
That is correct. Yeah. Somebody will hire me. It might take, 2 months, 3 months, however many steps we're doing. And I go to usually fly to where they're located, or they want to go off site and have these 2-3 day, power meetings. So yeah, that's what I do.
And that's been 25 years you've been doing that?
I have been doing that over 25 years. So, and then I bring in people. I have different facilitators that have been trained, and I bring in other people to help me when I need them.
And you and Marty have been together for how long?
We got married in 1999, so we are going on 20 years this year.
During all this time, your son is 17, you said?
He's 17 and a half, yeah.
You've still maintained an adventurous life, despite running a business, despite being married, despite having a child.
Raising a child, right.
Yeah. So just with that framework, tell me about some of the adventures that you've had beyond the South Pole expedition.
Right. So, sort of just reflecting back on those years when Keenan was younger, and then Marty and I moved forward in our life as well. We've had some that are just Marty and I doing certain things, and then we really try to incorporate my son. So early on, we decided that to schlep all the things you need for a child, that kayaking would be a good idea, because it was like camping or backpacking, but you don't have to carry all the stuff on your back. So we really got into kayaking for age 1 until like 8 with Keenan. And we ended up buying it's a pygmy kit out of Port Townsend.
What's a pygmy kit?
It's a kit to build a double kayak. And so it's a wooden kayak that we built ourselves. Huh. And then we, have taken that to great places around here. One of our favorites is the Broken Island Group, which is off the southwestern part of Victoria. Mm-hmm. And it's this chain of islands that you can kayak to, and you camp, and then kayak to another one and you camp. And, that was really great adventures with my son. But one of the really fun things we did, we wanted to travel internationally. We're like, what age can we take him internationally? And so at age 7, we really wanted to go to Africa. And so we decided we want to go to Tanzania. So with him, we decided we were going to do this bike around Mount Kilimanjaro. And so he wasn't really big enough to ride his own bike. So we had this tag-along bike we decided to bring with us.
And that would just attach to the back of one of your bikes?
Yes, correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's what we did. And it was quite an adventure. We really didn't know how that was going to all work, but we did hire a company called Sene, S-E-N-E. It's basically a group who does some tours in Africa. And so he was an ultra running friend of ours from Tanzania. And so he ran this business of doing some tours. And so he wanted to try out this biking thing. And we were like, we'll be guinea pigs. And so he had a few bikes. And so we we brought this tag along with us, which on the last plane, as we were landing in Africa, the last plane before we landed in Africa, we basically had to make sure this little bike got on the plane, and we're looking out on the tarmac and we're like, I don't see it on with the baggage guys. Where is our bike? And so Marty runs off this little plane and pulls a 20 out and says, go find this bike.
Oh my gosh.
And this guy ran over and found it and shoved it on.
So it nearly didn't make it.
It nearly didn't make it. So that was great.
And running out on the tarmac is something that you can only do in a developing country.
Completely. Nobody even asked, why are you getting off the plane?
I was asked, just a little segue, because it's so crazy. I was on a little tiny plane in Papua New Guinea, and there was too much luggage for them to carry everything. So they were asking that the luggage from my group, because I run tours,
right,
the luggage from my group be taken off and put on the next flight. And so someone asked me to go in the cargo hold and start picking which luggage should come off. And when the flight attendant found out about it, because I wouldn't have just gone in there myself, right? But it was like the person who was running this tiny airport told me to go do it. And the flight attendant went ballistic. She made me fill out a report, like, to get this person in trouble, because they had me walk into the cargo hold on this tiny little flight. So the things that you can get away with is just crazy.
Correct.
You'd never be able to walk out on a tarmac here.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So, we've done a lot of really awesome adventures. We've rafted down the Grand Canyon with my son. We have circumnavigated Mount St. Helens, fast packing around it with him. We have taken him to Everest Base Camp in Nepal. So we've gone back to Tanzania and climbed Kilimanjaro.
Where do you get your energy from? I don't have kids, and I can only imagine it's exhausting to have a child. I can only imagine it's like quadruply exhausting to travel with a child and then to do adventurous things like that. Were you just, for you, is it just such a natural thing that you're like, okay, we're going to bring Keenan with us? Or is it like, we're going to figure this out and we're going to do everything that we can to make this happen? Like, how easy on a scale of 1 to 10 is that for you?
Right. Well, that would be different depending on what age he was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And now it's just easy peasy. But in those early years, I think is more that question. In the early years, you are so excited as a parent to share what you love with your child that you figure it out at first. You just figure out, you do not know what's going to happen. Are we going to have a meltdown? The first time we went to Tanzania, he had to have a lot of shots and, take malaria pills. And this was quite an undertaking. And the shots just, we didn't want to go through that. He had this whole thing. He couldn't swallow big pills very easily. So we had major meltdowns in the airport on the way to Tanzania. You have to take this malaria pill. You have to take this pill to protect you from malaria. And we would crush it. We would try to, and it just, he
put it in ice cream.
He literally couldn't swallow it. He has this gag reaction. So, these are just one of small things, but it's major when you're worried about these kinds of things with your child. But somehow, just even as it's what drives you as an adult to go and do things that are, you're not sure about. It's kind of the same thing. And it's like every time you do it, you realize, well, he's done this before, so we can try to have this. So it's how I think about expanding our comfort zones and expanding who we are. It's the same thing with a child. It's like, well, he's done this. And so now, well, he'll be okay with this.
And have you found that there are things you've had to back away from? Like, that didn't work so well, so maybe we won't do that again?
Yeah. With a kid, you learn to back away, but it doesn't mean you're not going to do it again. It means that wasn't the right time or place for that thing. And we might reintroduce it at another time, similar to like when you're trying foods.
I was going to say like green beans.
And so, that really makes me think of a second trip we went to Tanzania. He was 10. And again, we love Tanzania so much. We keep going back there. There's many places that are wonderful in the world. And for some reason, we have this real attachment to that country. So when he was 10, we realized, if you're 10, you can climb Kilimanjaro. You have to be at least 10. And he just turned 10. And so we were like, let's do it. So we're going to go back. And, well, I don't know if he can take this, but we'll see how far he gets. This is what we'll do.
Yeah, why not?
And so we decided to do some more biking. So we ended up, the first part of the trip was biking from sort of foothills of Kilimanjaro all the way to the coast. And that was like a 4-day bike. It was fantastic. Yeah. It was all through villages, not on major roads. And so, okay. And then we had like a day of rest. And then we go to Kilimanjaro. Okay, so I think we might have overstepped the boundaries of what he could take. But he was all up for it, so we start the climb. And, climbing Kilimanjaro, we went slower. A typical climb might take 5 or 6 days to get to the summit. I think we decided to do 8 so he could acclimatize better. But still, here he is, a 10-year-old. And that how you get up, well, maybe people don't know this, but usually that summit day, sometimes you get up really early, like midnight.
Oh, it's crazy.
Right? And then you're tired and it's dark and it's for safety reasons and it's to get down. So that's what we did. And that morning I could just tell whether it was his nerves or lack of sleep. He didn't, 30 minutes into that day, he said, Mom, my stomach hurts. So he threw up. We had been, taking his oxygen level the whole time. So we knew he was oxygenated and there wasn't a, risk of real problem. But so Marty and I looked at each other and were like, okay, he's not going to make it. But he said, I'm going to keep going. And we said, okay. So for 3 hours, he kept pushing on.
10-year-old.
A 10-year-old.
Oh, my gosh.
And it was dark and it was cold.
Oh, yeah.
And we're moving so slow that we're getting cold.
Yeah, I've been there.
Right?
And
we have every stitch of clothing on that we own and still we're getting cold. I remember this. It's etched in my mind forever. At 2:39, I look at my watch, 2:39 in the morning. He's like, couldn't eat any more food. And we looked at each other and Marty and I said, Keenan, it's time to say this is your summit. It's time to turn around. He was devastated. He started crying and, I'm a failure. And I know a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Then as a parent, you think, oh my gosh, did we make you think that, you're a failure if you don't make it? So that was a great lesson because we had a lot of conversations after that moment once we got back to the tent and everything was fine.
So you all went back.
Actually, I was about to say, as it turned out, Marty and I decided we had a guide with us and we decided, Marty, you go to the summit for our family. And he took this little stuffed animal thing that Keenan had. And so, he's like, no. And I was like, I think it's fine. You go for the family. You take the photo up there and we will go back. And so with Keenan, he was sort of shaky. I literally had him arm in arm. It wasn't dangerous, but it was downhill.
Well, it's all shale coming down.
I guess you would say it's sort of dangerous for somebody who isn't.
Especially if it's still dark out.
It's dark, yeah. Mm-hmm. The sun hasn't been up.
And you're tired.
Exactly. So I just lock arm in arm with him and we make our way down. And, I remember the guide saying, no, you go, Chris, and I'll take your son. And I was like, there is no way I'm not going down with my son. Mama Bear comes up and says, no. So we get back to the tent and that's when I still remember he literally collapsed and then in his sleep he's like, no, I don't want to turn around.
Aww.
I know. He literally did that. And I was like, oh my goodness. And, the anxiety that I felt just all came out and I started bawling. And it was more like I don't want to damage my son by doing hard things.
Mm-hmm. Have you been back since and summited with him?
So this past summer, we went with another family, one of his best friends. And it was and he summited.
Great.
And it was almost like a piece of cake for him as a 17-year-old, very strong. But still quite a challenge, right? But he told me afterwards that I'm so glad I finally got that taken care of, or, kind of got that.
That's behind me.
Finally did it. And I said, has that been really something that's been on your mind? And he said, I guess so. Yeah, ever since I was 10. Even though he made it to like 17,000 as a 10-year-old, and he was a rock star, it was a great learning lesson.
Mm-hmm. So you're doing these adventurous things, but you also got into running and ultra running.
Exactly.
And you were not a runner like growing up, were you?
No.
What brought you to running?
So I was mentioning that story about Denali, and I had done a little bit of running to get prepared for that, just to sort of, along with weightlifting and other things. So I think I'd worked up to like maybe 5 or 10 miles just to, aerobically increase my aerobic, but I wasn't really a runner. So then Marty moved here, and he had run marathons before. And so he said, Chris, you're in fantastic shape from running Denali, from climbing Denali. In 2 months, there's a marathon, 3 months in Seattle. Wow, we should just run that.
Just like that.
I was like, I don't know if I can be ready to run a marathon. I mean, so yeah, so basically Marty started it. Really. I mean, I had run, like I said, some before a little bit, but hadn't dedicated myself to that.
Was there any part of you that thought like, here's this new guy in my life. He's he's like challenging me in this way. I better buck up and figure this out?
Well, I don't think so. I think more it was an exciting adventure we could do together. I do. So we just started running, and figuring it out together. And he had, like I said, he had run some marathons before, but he wasn't a marathon runner, but he'd run some marathons. And so, yeah, I did the Seattle Marathon that year in the rain. It's always raining.
I know,
and
November,
freezing,
Thanksgiving weekend, right?
So
why do we do that? I know.
So the whole ultra running thing, really, I would have to say, it was sort of a Marty led. And then me saying, I could do that too. And one of the reasons was a couple years later, he decided he wanted to step up his game and was like, what's this ultra stuff? What is an ultra marathon? This is exciting.
Was that after Born to Run came out, the book?
No, it was before, but it was sort of like in that era, right?
Yeah.
So we were like, ultra running. Chris, I just found this thing called Western States 100, online. It looks really cool, but I have to run a 50 miler to qualify. So I'm just going to pick a 50 miler that I'll do in a few months. And then I'll qualify, and then I'll get into that. He had this whole plan, Meanwhile, we were deciding that we were going to try to have a family. Somewhere in there, I got pregnant. So I'm sort of running, but not stepping it up as much as him yet. So he runs this 50 miler in Oregon and it turns out it's a flat as a pancake 50 miler. And he's thinking he's this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I got this, 8 hours 50 miler, and it's flat, So he's thinking, oh yeah, I'll be able to do that.
Was that a road race?
It was actually a trail,
but
it was
just a flat.
There wasn't even gravel. It was just like a road, almost better because it's softer.
Yeah.
So anyway.
And for listeners, a couple things I'll clarify. So an ultra is technically it's anything over a marathon, which is 26.2 miles. Often they are 50K, which is 31 miles. And usually these longer ones are trail runs.
Yeah.
So when you do find something like I've been wanting to do a road 50 miler, but they're really difficult to find because most you get out on a trail when you do want to do the long distance. And the Western States 100 is a trail run.
Yeah.
So the big difference.
Through the mountains.
Yeah, through the mountains. So the big difference that you're getting to, I think, is the fact that he breezed through this easy trail. Flat 50 miler.
Yeah.
And then.
Western States 100 is, starts in Squaw Valley, and basically it's a point to point, and it's through the mountains. He decided he's going to enter that, and now it's really hard to get into.
It is. It's lottery. It's elite or lottery.
And back then, it was still a lottery, but you have higher chances. And so he got in his first try. Okay, here we are. We're and anyway, I show up and help him, crew him, and was going to be running with him from different aid stations, pacing him as well. And anyway, long story short, he basically by mile 93 3, the last aid station, he's like, I can't run anymore. And I'm just going to walk I have enough time to walk the last.
Yeah, which most people do. They walk a lot
do.
Of those ultra races.
So I walked with him that last part, ran with him some other parts, and got him to the finish line. You have to get in under 30 hours. He was like 29:30. And he literally crossed the finish line and laid down and went to sleep.
I can totally
But I mean,
see
that was the beginning. And then, I was like, that planted the seed of, I bet I wonder how far I can go.
Had you had your son yet?
At that point we had not. And then, because I was like, who was watching Keenan? No, he wasn't there yet.
But it planted a seed.
It did. And then a year later, I think it was about a year later, I had Keenan. And that's when he went off to do the Marathon des Sables in Morocco. That's when I was pregnant, so I couldn't do that. I was race walking with the dog. But then, then we gradually sort of, caught up with each other and started training seriously. And then we hired, we actually worked with Scott Jurek as our coach.
Wow.
Yeah, he coached when he lived in Seattle for like a brief period, and we were lucky enough to coach with him. And that really stepped up our game big time. And then he's gone on to, he's just a living legend in the ultra running world, and has written a couple books. Yeah. So we ended up ultra running for, it's been 15 years. And we, for a decade there, we really trained hard every year, had races on the schedule, even when Keenan was a baby, even when he was 1 and 2. And I have pictures of him when he was 3, holding my hand, running across Western States finish line.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's neat.
It was really neat.
But you're not running as much, or you're not running at all now?
I'm not running as much now. I still run. I'm not racing. I haven't entered a race for a while, but we always still do some race adventures that we make up ourselves. And like the last few years, we've just, run around Mount St. Helens, the 33-mile loop, around
just for the fun of it.
Just for the fun of it.
In a day,
yeah. We jokingly said the other day, maybe this year we'll break our record for our slowest time.
That's a good attitude. Yeah.
But yeah, our knees, especially my husband's was having some knee issues and, the wear and tear. But yeah, we're kind of shaking it up, doing more strength training, doing some other adventures and things now.
What I love about your story and listening to this is that it seems like you've just let things kind of evolve. And I think that is more often than not how we live our lives. 95% of people. And that's okay. What I'm saying is that that's perfectly fine. We are hard on ourselves because we don't have a plan, because we don't have a 1-year goal or a 5-year goal or a 10-year goal. But you're saying, oh, look, he started running. Maybe I'll start running. Oh, look, now I'll try an ultra. Now I'll try this. Now I'll move on to this. Now I'll get a coach. Now I'll try this next step. And it's just step by step. And it doesn't have to be some huge grand thing from day one. Just things evolve. You learn what ultra running is, and then you start running, and then you get bigger and bigger. Right.
Exactly. I mean, I would not have started by saying, I'm going to run 100 miles. I started by, okay, I'll run a 50K. See how that goes. And then you do a 50 miler. But for sure, in what you were saying, I agree that it's a step by step. There's definitely goals in there that stretch you and motivate me to go to the next goal.
Well, but they
don't have to be a 10-year goal.
You're right. And, I guess maybe as I'm talking this through, what I'm thinking is I'm putting myself in the place of a listener who may look at your life or look at any one of my guests' lives and say, I can't do that. Mm-hmm. Like I had this gal on, Leah Ditton, who she is planning to row 5,500 miles from Japan to San Francisco.
Right.
Now someone is going to listen to that and say, I could never do that, and dismiss that, any realm of that as a possibility.
Right.
But you know what? Maybe they could go buy a kayak. Or maybe they could rent a kayak or take kayak lessons and do their first thing to get out on the water. Sure. And so when I'm listening to you, that's my whole point about it, is that they can look at you, they can look at your lifestyle, and they can say, well, that might be nice for her because she has her own business and can control her schedule. But we all have things like that. We all have weekends. We have nights free. There are things that we can do
For sure.
that don't have to be, it doesn't have to be the big thing. And it's all a process.
Right, for sure. I think it always comes back to, we were talking about awareness of yourself and your life. What is it at the core of yourself that you want? What do you want? Do you want to feel a bold and boundless life? How do you manifest that? Do you want to feel fully alive? How do you manifest? What is it? It doesn't have to be the things that I'm doing. I mean, maybe, it's the same as, I think the same things happen for writing a book or doing anything. They don't have to be these giant physical activities. It's that you have to just decide that there's something inherent in delivering that to yourself or the world that is important. Some people call it, sort of a vision for themselves or a purpose. What is the purpose behind that thing that you want to do? So I always look for things that have the intersection of excitement and scary at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I know that is, if I'm aware of that, that becomes a signal to me that, okay, I might need to be paying attention to that because it's something that's going to challenge me in a way that is exciting. Because, certain challenges are just scary to people. And so then they're not going to be motivated to do that. But if it's kind of got those two elements, then they're tapping into something in you that it must be something inherent in you that is important. And if we all recognize that or become more aware of that, I think that, that's where those possibilities open up for you.
Do you give that much thought to it when you decide to do something? I don't know what you have planned for the future. Well, I do know what you have planned for the
immediate future.
For the immediate future. Yeah. But that's already, and we'll talk about that, but that's already something that's planned. But when you think, and maybe you can go back in time and you had made plans maybe to do your first ultra. And I think you were doing 50 milers or were you doing 100 milers also?
Yeah, I worked up to 100 milers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you did your first 100 miler and you just signed up for it, did you give that thought of, this is both exciting and I'm a little fearful of it, so that's why I'm going to do it? Or did you just sign up for it and then in retrospect realize, ooh, I've got butterflies in my stomach, yet I'm so excited about this, I'm going to still do it? I don't know if I'm asking that question right.
No, I understand your question.
Okay.
It's really hard to say. It may be a retrospective thing, and it might be as I've grown older over the years, I can see that pattern of those choices I've made. What would drive me to do those things? What would motivate me to put in the time? All of these things are kind of require a lot of effort. You put in hundreds and hundreds of hours of training and thousands of miles in the mountains. And so I would never commit to that 100 miler if I didn't also enjoy a lot of the training. I really enjoy the training.
So the process, yeah.
I enjoy the process. I enjoy being able to be in the mountains for hours. I'm going to go run for 10 hours. I'm going to be with my friends running in the mountains for 10 hours. Some people are going to say, that sounds horrible. I mean, a lot of people probably will. Yeah. But to me, after you work to that is pure joy. But it's also going to be hard. So there's this joy. Somehow there is a joy in the struggle and making it through together. There is something there that is, I think, primal. And so, no, I probably didn't articulate this and just consciously think all of this, but I do know I would think and smile. And sure, some days you're like, oh, have to go do this again. But then you realize it's going to add up to something bigger. So we put in our time to add into something bigger that is really our life. Yeah.
Do you make decisions by gut, or do you sit down with a pen and paper and write out the pros and cons? Or do you do both?
I do both. I would, a lot of the decisions that if it's going to affect my husband, if it's going to affect my son, you definitely rationally think through it. But then once you've kind of pondered it, it might come down to that gut.
I'm all gut.
Are you all gut?
Yeah, I am. I have a couple things coming up. I don't know if I might have told you about this. So I'm doing Epic 5 in September, which
Yeah.
is 5 ultras, 5 Hawaiian Islands in 5 days. And I knew when I heard about it that I had to just do it.
For sure. You know,
There was like,
there's definitely decisions I do like that too. Yeah.
but now, I do it. I sign up for it. I pay in full, non-refundable. Goodbye. Like there's my money, right?
Right. Now I have to figure it out.
Yeah. And now when I look at the calendar and I look at it fast approaching, and really I have one more trip coming up next week. I've been gone pretty much for the most of the past 6 weeks or so, and I've got one more trip to go. And once I get that behind me, then it's going to be full on training. Then, like, I can feel butterflies in my stomach right now just talking about it, because I'm like, oh shit, what did I just do?
Right. But those butterflies get you out of your bed in the morning.
Well, that's true.
I mean,
yeah.
they really do. They're like your little partner in training.
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah, that is. You know what? I need a little mascot. I need a little butterfly mascot
that's great.
Just to remind me of that's what it's about.
Yeah.
But I make the decision and then I figure it out later.
Yeah. That's in some regards you were alluding to, because I have this adventure coming up. That is a little bit how we decided to do this race to Alaska that my husband and I have entered.
Well, let's talk about that right now,
Okay.
since you brought it up, and then let's go back to the South Pole, because I want to hear some details about the South Pole.
Okay,
so
perfect.
you have coming up this summer the race to Alaska.
Yeah, and that came up where we've been sort of looking for another adventure to do, but we weren't willing to commit to as much time away as the South Pole, because that was 2 months. And, when I came back from the South Pole, my mindset was, everything needs to be about my son, and he's the priority. I don't want him to feel like he's not the priority. But, really that was really me, and it wasn't my son. It was me feeling like I had to overcome some sort of guilt that I have about leaving for 2 months.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that's a really good decision, because those are they're all formative years, right?
Yeah.
But really formative years where you've got to be
well, and it turns out also that this high school years, these are great to be here for him. Mm-hmm. And really all of our adventures have been with him. And so this is just a smaller adventure. In fact, I was completely against it at first, because it turns out they moved the date up and we have to leave the week of his finals. But then I kind of talked myself down. I'm like, he is a junior in high school, Chris. He can study. And my sister, who lives in North Bend, and her husband are very close with him, and they're going to be the adults, and they're
great
at the home with him. Not that he just kind of sort of be his cheerleaders, feed him while he's studying. So I was able to commit. So basically, this is a 750-mile journey from Port Townsend to Victoria, and then from Victoria through the Inside Passage to Ketchikan, Alaska. And basically, it's the 5th year they've been doing this race, and any watercraft can enter that is non-motorized. And so it's mostly sailing boats that enter, but you'll also have kayakers, and you'll have rowers, and there's a sup person. Mm-hmm. So it's a race, but it's also an adventure that you can do with other people. So we chose to do this race. We wanted to do it at the way that we do adventure, which is, there's some human endurance involved. And so, but we didn't want to take as long as a kayak. So we landed on this outrigger sailing canoe as our vessel of choice. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to have, my husband and I don't have sailing experience. We have kayaking experience, and our third teammate, Danny, has the sailing experience. So the three of us are going to do this journey.
And that's in June, is that right?
It just starts June 3rd.
And how long do you expect it to take?
We are still trying to guess. It really depends on the winds, because if you're paddling a lot or if you're sailing a lot. But we are guessing our best effort would be probably 7 or 8 days. If it's no wind at all, it might be 2 weeks.
Is there a time limit on it?
I believe I'm not sure. There might be, but it's long.
Okay.
Yeah, it's long, because there's people that kayak and they take 3 or 4 weeks.
Wow. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm not sure there must.
So
be
you're not concerned about a cutoff time?
We're not, and I think ultimately, we should be able to do it in a couple of weeks, because there's going to be wind. When you're talking about diving in, this is one of those cases where this is not a lot. We didn't get our boat here from Kauai until mid-January, and it's in June. So we're still outfitting the boat to customize it to be more like an expedition boat, because it's really more of a day trip boat. And learning to sail it is.
Have you taken
unique.
it out?
We've taken it out a bunch.
Because we've had record high temperatures.
Oh yeah, we
here,
had it out since January.
Yeah.
The first few weeks we had to brush snow off of the tramps. But yeah, we have it docked near Lake Washington, so it's always on the water, so we can just go. And,
excellent.
Yeah, so it's been really great, but it's a really steep learning curve. We're still learning, so it's definitely one of those. Oh my gosh, looking at the calendar, we only have this many weeks left.
Mm-hmm. What a great thing, though, when you say it's a steep learning curve, that it's what a great thing, not only physically, but mentally for you. Because, that's another thing that I think happens. And, I've talked about this on the podcast, that there's this thing when you turn 50, I think a lot of people think that things are downhill from there.
Yeah.
And you continue, you're 54,
Yeah.
You are continuing to challenge yourself, not only physically, but also mentally. Like, I got to figure out how to sail this thing.
Right.
And that's so critical to continuing to live a happy, healthy, bold life.
I think so.
To keep moving forward. It's so critical.
Yeah. And I think that's one reason when you said, you heard about those races and you're like, yes. Yeah. I think our brains start to recognize all the elements that we know kind of line up to when we do more of these things, that you say that yes more easily and more quickly because it sort of ticks the boxes of the kinds of things that are attractive to you and then kind of help you grow and learn. And
well, good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, really, let's talk about the meat. Let's talk about...
Too much to talk about, right?
I know, but it's great, though, as long as you're okay with it.
I'm great.
Let's talk about the expedition itself, how it came about, how the heck you even thought that, to come up with this expedition.
Yeah.
And how it all played out.
So I would start by saying that, we've talked about the ultra running and we've talked about mountaineering, and those two skill sets came together. So we had really done some hardcore kind of endurance activities for 2 decades. So we had the experience under our belt. We knew how to, when you're up on Denali, it is like Arctic conditions. So freezing, wind howling, knowing how to work in those kind of environments, winter camping. And then the ultra running is all about the endurance, physical and mental ability to endure, to go beyond where you think you can go. And then you realize you can go there. So those two things came together. And at the same time, we were kind of at the peak of our training with ultra running. And yes, you could run farther. There's these 200-mile races now and all kinds of races. But I have to say my husband was the originator of the idea, where he sort of just, again, planted the seed of, he literally walked in the kitchen one day and said, "Hey, what do you think about expeditioning to the South Pole?" I was like, what? Where is this coming from? But I knew because of our history, this wasn't just coming out, this was not coming out of clear blue sky. This was not a joke. This was, hey, what should we do next kind of thing. In that moment, and it's happened over and over, hey, I should write a book. Hey, I should do this. You get that instant, what? I don't think so, in your mind. That resistance of whatever that is, it sounds really hard, maybe dangerous, and I don't know if I want to put all the effort in that's going to take.
Do you think that's self-preservation?
It might be. It really might be, because it still comes up for me, even though I know I want to do things. It just sort of like this flash comes through you, like wind coming through your body, like, woo, are you sure? So it definitely, that just sort of cracked the door open slightly for the conversation to start. And it was a year conversation for both of us, because he literally planted the seed, but he didn't know. He didn't know either, because you don't know until you find out what you don't know. Like, what does that mean? What would that count? How much
is it even possible?
How much does that cost? How much time does it take? How do you even get to Antarctica? Are there polar bears there? No, they're in the north, they're in, the Arctic. There's all of these questions that you realize you don't even know what the questions are. So you don't blindly walk into something that's really beyond you. You really have to research it. And sometimes people on the surface think about adventurers that were daredevils, but I was in this conversation the other day that I feel like the opposite of daredevil. I really don't feel like a daredevil. I feel like daredevils are adrenaline seeking people that might do these quick rushes, bungee jumping or, something, barreling down a hill skiing or double black diamond or something. But, those kinds of things, mine are long endurance kind of slogging things in some ways. And so I think it's the opposite. It's just hard. They're hard things. So
it takes research and preparation.
Yes. And,
too.
That's part of it. And I think that's the part of the fabric, that has weaved my husband and I together, is that every day of researching and talking about neat things and learning new things, we're doing it together. That makes that journey so much richer and more fun and a memory that we share. So, and the struggle to decide to do something together, we're challenging each other to become our next person together. That can be a lot sometimes. And then sometimes it's like, okay, I'm ready. You're ready. I'm ready. So you kind of are trying to, be on the same path at the same time, So he brought up the idea. We started researching like crazy. And then we talked to experts. We read every book we possibly could get our hands on. We have this giant polar library. we called experts. We are talking to guides, and we signed up for trainings to vet our skills. So I went off and did my own training with a polar guide. They were training their people they're guiding. And I was just tagging along on the training where he could assess my skills.
Where was the training?
Mine was in Ely, Minnesota, in the winter. All the lakes were frozen and we were sort of simulating, Arctic conditions. And then Marty was back home with my son. And then he went to Norway and sort of the Arctic version of a different, he got to go there and I had.
Yeah, right. You're in Minnesota.
Flip the coin. Yeah. So we both were kind of vetted by a guide who'd been there a number of times. And because our whole decision point was, well, do we want to go with a guide or not? Okay, because now we're going to do it. Are we going to hire a guide or not? And they gave us kind of the green light and said, you guys have I think you have what it takes. And so that was a big hurdle to get over, to say, okay, now we can deposit our money for the flight. So there's only one company that flies people to Antarctica from the United States. You can get there on government planes if you work for the government. You can get there, I think, somehow through a Russian plane and organization, but Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions is the only company that can fly you there. And they, in the last 5 years, have started to do a little more tourism kind of flights there. People can, fly to the South Pole and see it. There's a research station there. I don't know if people realize that, but the U.S. research station is there.
Well, when the boats go from Ushuaia to Antarctica, are they going a different way? Or
a lot of times they're doing landings on some of the sort of different parts that jut out from the central location, or they take smaller boats to see like the penguins and things.
Not to the area where you are going.
No, because we literally flew, once we decided we were going, we checked all this out and we ended up, flying, you fly down to Punta Arenas, Chile, and then they fly you on a sort of a Russian Ilyushin cargo plane, wheels down, landing on this blue ice runway.
What is there when you get there? Anything?
So the only thing that is there is a temporary base camp that this company sets up and then they tear down. So for about 3 months a year, they set up a temporary base camp to have communications for landing, to have a place where people eat and some tents and things.
But are people living there to do work?
At this camp, no, this is just purely to support adventurers and the few the tourist folks that they have. So it's literally it's a pop-up village and then it goes away.
So when the tourist, sorry, I have so many questions about it because I'm trying to envision it. So when a tourist arrives that is not doing an expedition to the South Pole.
Yes.
Are they staying overnight?
Yeah, so they have these kind of dome tents that are semi-permanent that the tourists or guided people are staying in, and they're kind of dotted the land. As you're looking down from the plane, you'll see these dotted tents, and you'll see some sort of bigger industrial tents, and the bigger industrial tent will be like a place where you eat and like, sort of a shower toilet area. And
so people come in there, and then is there anything to do around there? Like there's not the penguins, or there's
nothing to do there.
So people just go so that they can say that they've been.
Well, they go there, and then what happens is smaller planes are parked there, and a smaller plane will then take you to where you're going. So if this team is going to go see the South Pole, so you're at a place called Union Glacier. So you're not at the South, you're just at this place. And then they'll take you to the South Pole, or they also have a place where you go see the penguins. Mm-hmm. Or the other popular reason is people go down there to climb Mount Vinson. If people know about the 7 summits, that's one of the 7 summits. Mm-hmm. So it's the highest peak on the continent. So that's where they would go there as well. So those of us who were there to do the full Antarctic quest are very few. Mm-hmm. And so
were you the only 2 on that flight?
There was a few other folks. There was at that time there was a young man who was trying to be guided to be the youngest to do it with a guide.
Uh-huh.
He was
How old
16. Is he? So there's a few other folks as well. So yeah.
Did they make it?
He made it. These other few people were trying to bike. I know. And so they were kind of biking and pushing their bike a lot. I think they both made it.
Okay.
Eventually. Yeah, so there was a few people other than us. But none of us were together. And so
you never saw them.
No, until we got to, we actually saw the 16-year-old boy and his guide, and they were sort of approaching the South Pole. Literally, we got there within, I think, 30 minutes of each other, which was so strange.
That is
so strange. But we were coming from different angles, and so we're like, I think I see a dot of something moving on the horizon over there. And then as we got closer,
you realized,
yeah. So it was quite interesting. So it was, that's how we got there, and we were at base camp there for a few days until we could get our flight out because there was, bad weather where we were trying to start. Yeah.
And so you were 48 days out.
We were, we started day 1 was not at Union Glacier. It was when we got dropped at the edge by ourselves. And then it was just the 2 of us every day. It was like 10 hours of pulling 220-pound sleds every day.
220 pounds each?
Yes.
And what kind of sleds were they?
They were custom made in Norway.
They weren't like Red Flyer or like
yeah, I know. Those are the kind that people use on Denali to carry.
Do they really?
Just because you're kind of you're not pulling as much weight. But yeah, these are carbon fiber, 7 foot long, 3 foot wide sleds.
Specially made for expeditions like that.
Specially made, yeah, with a sort of the zipper compartment all contained as one. So you're putting all you were carrying all of our food, fuel, and gear for the entire time. Some people will have depots dropped where they pick up supplies, and so that's called supported, where they have depots. And so, their sleds will be half the weight.
But it's nice as you're going along, and presumably, you're probably getting fit as you're going, but you're also getting tired, but the weight that you're pulling is getting less.
Yeah, you're on track there. So our thought was we would be starting out a little slower because of the weight of the sled. And, just kind of getting, like I said, acclimatized to everything. And so we were trying to predict, you have to predict how fast you're going to be going, how much food should we bring, how much fuel. And so we predicted an average of 15 miles a day that we'd cover. This was based on all kinds of research, talking to people, etc. When we started out, we knew we weren't going to hit that. So, okay, we're at 11, 12, we're not hitting our mark. It's okay. But pretty quickly, actually it was sort of a slow drip at first. It was like, we're not hitting 15 a day. And then you can do simple math and start figuring out,
It's going to take us another month. Right?
We were shooting for 40 to 45 days. So we brought 45 days of food. Pretty soon after 5-10 days, you're like, we're going to have to do 17 miles a day to make up what we've lost. And that doesn't seem realistic. So it really put a lot of pressure on us early on to just go out every day. And basically we were told, you need to go out almost every day. You can take a rest day. Some people take rest days every 10 days or so, but you got to get out in that every day. And you're not going to want to. But that's the only way you're going to get it done. And Marty ended up having some issues with his skis early on that were causing us to be slower than we should have been. So there was definitely problem solving happening early on that we're like, come on, this is supposed to be, this is supposed to be the easy part. Mm-hmm.
So were you able to up your miles, or did you never did your 15 or even 17 miles a day?
We ended up starting to hit 15 here and there, and that was giving us some really good excitement that, okay, now, but every time we would get there, then the terrain would change. Basically, the terrain, people think it's flat, but you're actually starting at sea level and you're going to the South Pole is at 9,000 feet. So it's a gradual uphill the whole time, gradual. At the same time, there's two different kinds of major obstacles or snow that we would encounter. When it was flat, you're like, oh, it's finally flat. You think it's going to be icy, but at this year that we were there, it was sticky. So it was a little softer and stickier than some other years. So it's like you're dragging through sand instead of gliding. That was just brutal. And then other times you're hitting these frozen waves of snow that are called sastrugi. And that's, basically you're looking out on wind-blown, it's almost like an ocean.
Sand dune or something.
Yeah, it's almost like an ocean waves that have been frozen in place. And so they're very rigid. And so you're going like across you're not going with them. The wind is blowing kind of slightly off where you want to go. So you're pulling over these. It was like you always had some factor that felt like it was working against you. And so yeah, we never were able to make that average. So along the way, we started to, it was right around day 30, 33, 34, we were just really hitting rock bottom. We had taken only one rest day in 33 days. And, we had pushed beyond, we kept pushing. And mentally and physically, just emotionally, it was just mentally so hard. You're so isolated. It's the most isolating experience of my life. It's also quite a beautiful place. I don't want to paint it as just this torture. I mean, it is just an amazing place to be, to realize you are in this place where few people have been, and to imagine yourself being like these explorers who have been there. And and the crazy, horrible situations that they were working through. So
was there tension between you and Marty during that time when it was really brutal, day 30, 33? Or were you guys just like, you were bonded in it together and you just got through it together?
I would say that there was not tension. Well, there wasn't tension like between us. There wasn't arguing and fighting. It was more like we had to both retreat into our own corners of the tent or in our minds to cope. So it felt at some point in there disjointed from the way that we normally would be, because you can't talk during the day. So you're just in your head. You're just by yourself. Hello. We're just following each other 8 hours. You get in the tent, and sometimes I'm a very talkative person and I want to debrief, and he's a little more introverted. So he needs a little downtime. And so, that wasn't necessarily working. And then when it got really hard, we were both coping with the hard thing that was impacting us. And so it was hard to be supportive of your spouse.
Yeah, because you're going through the same thing.
You were both. So all of our training, usually that other person can kind of lift you up because you're not usually at the lowest at the same time in ultra running and other things. And in this case, we really started hitting the bottom together. And so what ended up happening is we left a voice blog every single day. It's for followers. They could get it on our website and Facebook and everything. And I had a good friend that we called once a week to just check in, and she could give me the updates on Keenan. It really ended up, we were getting our boosting from outside the tent.
So you were in contact with people.
We were. We made that conscious choice to not be so pure that we're not talking to anybody.
Yeah.
Mostly for my son's sake. I mean, we needed to be in contact for his sake. And, in some ways that made it really hard too, because we decided to talk to him every 2 days. We'd call him. You just sort of be jarred back to real life.
Were you on a satellite phone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sat phone. Yep. And then we had a couple of people just feeding us some emails and things so that everybody didn't have email, and we could get updates that way about a few things. So
you bring up something really interesting when you say you kind of jarred back in every couple of days. It would bring you back into life. And I think that that's a problem with travel in general right now. And I'm guilty of it myself. You're in a foreign place and you're in a remote area. And I'm not even just talking about Antarctica. I'm just talking about any place in the world. And you're steeped in another culture. and then you're checking the local news
know.
or the email or even Facebook or Instagram or anything like that, that just doesn't allow you to fully immerse yourself in something. And sometimes that's good because sometimes you need a break. Like I was just spent 3 weeks in India, and India's hard. India's a difficult place to be. And it's nice to come back to the hotel room to have something fluffy.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
And to be able to immerse in something like that. But I also think that it's taking away from our experiences of fully immersing ourselves in a culture or an experience or a mountain climb in Alaska or, whatever it is.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying for sure. I can relate to that. Because when I climbed Denali in 1998, we didn't have all that stuff.
Right.
And it was complete immersion.
Mm-hmm.
It was complete immersion.
And isn't there beauty in that?
Yeah. The phone call to my parents after 24 days to say, we made it and I'm everything's great.
Mm-hmm.
That is.
And I'm getting married.
That is so different, than, so those people are, of course, worrying more. But yeah, there is something different that, just where we are in our society today is a different.
I'm glad that I lived through those times. I'm glad that I traveled during that time. So I know that. I know the importance of that.
Yeah, for sure. That was the same, like I said earlier, when I traveled by myself, it was the exact same. There was no anything. It was, you were just all in. Mm-hmm. You were all in. But I was going to compare the Denali experience when you're all in. There are other climbers around. So you aren't so isolated. I can't think of one example other than rowing across an ocean that is more isolating than skiing across Antarctica. Mm-hmm. It's so isolating. And so I think that, for me, it would have been a different experience if we couldn't communicate, but it was just, that was a way to actually keep sanity.
But you had to be.
Keep sanity more.
So I have a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned that, I didn't realize this, the South Pole is at 9,000 feet.
Yeah.
Does anyone ever do it in reverse so that they're going downhill? Downhill.
Well, I don't know. People
elevation.
might, but that, that doesn't, there's these sort of unwritten rules of, sure, you could do that, but then, what do you want to say? I did a full expedition to the South Pole. I don't know, people.
I see.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you don't care about any of that, you could do whatever you want. There was the year before that we went to Antarctica, there was a few guys that were going from the coast to the South Pole and then back to the coast. So they definitely did that. And they were retracing a route that
that would be interesting to know how many days it took them on both ends.
Correct. It was much faster going back because you're going downhill. And also another fact is that the wind is almost predominantly always blowing in your face as you're going towards the pole.
Oh, it sounds miserable.
And then so when you're going away from it, you're getting pushed by the wind. Mm-hmm. So that, of course, would make it easier to go the other direction.
Did you have sponsors?
We did not have full-on sponsors. We had a few companies that gave us some deals on a few of their products, but nah.
I'm just imagining the amount of gear that you need.
Oh, yeah. I'm telling you. It turned out we thought we were going to try to get sponsors, but then it turned out in the end, the effort that it would take. We both were working full, jobs, and we're like, I think if we don't divert our attention and just keep working.
Yeah.
That would probably be a wash.
I know. It's so interesting.
It's really hard.
Like if I spend 10 hours with this client,
right,
I'll make as much as
10 hours. I might, and at least I know I'm going to make some actual money,
Yeah. I know that. I know that the sponsorships, like an ultra running or whatever it is, what in so many endeavors just doesn't really pay for itself.
Yeah. Especially unless you're some elite athlete doing this full time for them. It's just a lot of those dollars aren't really there.
Yeah. So other questions, you had mentioned the food that you had. How many calories a day were you consuming?
We brought 5,600 calories a day. And we, based on our estimates from everybody we spoke with, because of the time we
per person,
5,600 per person. And of course, for people who don't realize, an athlete, I was probably eating 2,400 a day back here. So that's double. But we were told, we would burn even more because of the cold, et cetera. So we were planning we'd be burning like 8,000. So we, beforehand calculated, you're going to lose weight. And so that was one of the main things that these experts told us. You're ready to go, but you need to gain weight. I guess as ultra runners, so they're like, you need to gain like 15 pounds at least. So I gained like 12 beforehand. It was really so hard to gain, it's hard to gain weight because you're exercising all the time, So
what did you do to gain weight? Were you just eating more? Were you going to fast food restaurants?
No, I wasn't eating. I really wasn't eating. I was doing more protein, and it was trying to pack on strength. I was trying to pack on muscle weight. So I was doing a lot more strength training than I was doing when I was ultra running. And so, I was getting kind of bulkier. My upper body got bulkier. We were doing a lot more upper body. Some of our training was just to pull these 2 SUV tires around 10 hours on the Snoqualmie Valley Trail.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I
saw pictures of that.
Was hard.
I didn't realize how far you were going with it.
We worked up to that, of course. Yeah. So 5,600 calories. And that sometimes at first that was really hard to get in.
Yeah. What were you eating that was so calorie dense?
Well, we had about 2.5 pounds. So we calculated it was about 2.5 pounds of food per person per day. We tried to be as dense as we could, but we just had to have a lot. So we had a lot of nuts.
Were you eating like Cliff Bars or was it dehydrated food?
Yeah, we had both. We had bars. So in the morning we had, a concentrated oatmeal kind of thing with whole powdered milk in it and butter and nuts. And we ended up having so much chocolate that we brought that we started stirring chocolate into it in the morning.
Bummer.
I know, right? And our coffee and stuff. So that was the morning. And on the go during the day, you're just eating bars and nuts and things like that. And then at night we would have, dehydrated. We'd always have a soup, and then we'd have a big dehydrated meal. Those ones that say 2.5 people, and you eat the whole thing.
Yeah.
Those Mountain House was our favorite. We tested them all.
And then how much weight did you lose?
It was really hard to tell exactly, but I think I lost about 15. Because when we got there, I just started eat. You're waiting a few days to go, so I was eating. I was trying to eat all their stuff,
right?
And then when we got back, it was we couldn't find a scale right away. So anyway,
you never
roughly
know.
speaking,
right? And the other thing too is that it's like, well, when you run a marathon, the day after, you always gain weight because your body is going, what's going on?
Oh yeah, it's just so bizarre with and the way you're regulating water and
you
calories.
Can't really tell.
Yeah. So, but in the end, I think my husband lost more like 20, 25. He was having issues. He didn't, he was already leaner, I think, than he should have been to go. And you're pulling on a sled, a harness, and he had issues where it was just digging into his,
because he didn't have enough fat there.
Didn't have enough fat there, and his a nerve. He was having some nerve pushing on his nerve, pulling, and so he had to adjust that constantly. So we had to put padding where the padding was gone.
Women tend to carry a little bit
more.
We do tend to carry a little bit more. What was the first thing that you did when you got home to eat? I always like to know that when people travel, like, what are you craving? What's that thing?
By the time we got home, it was like a 5-day ordeal to get all the way back home. So we had already kind of moved through lots of food and things. I really wanted anything fresh.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So it wasn't like I need to have pizza or whatever. It was like, can I just have something that's fresh? So salads, fruits. I mean, I just couldn't get enough fresh anything. So that really was it.
There's a guy who has done a solo expedition, and now I'd have to look this up. I don't know if it was to the South Pole, if it was the North Pole. And I think he has a TED Talk, and he's been kind of on the talking circuit. So I know a little bit about him, obviously not enough to know his name. So apologies on that, but I'll look it up. I'll see if I can put it in the show notes. All that is to say that he often gets asked about how he pees and how he takes care of himself.
Oh yeah.
When he's out there. How did you handle that? And what was the temperature?
Oh, right. We didn't talk about that.
No.
Well, it started out so when you're there, it's the summer in Antarctica. So it's the opposite of,
so it's nice and warm.
Yeah. So it was, the average temperature is about 20 below. When we started, it was actually maybe 10 below. So 20 below. By the time we got to the pole, it's getting colder and colder as you're getting closer. So it was the last day as we approached the pole was 50 below. I think that was with wind chill. So, you basically want to keep yourself all covered at all times. And we had these face masks where we sewed in a face mask into the goggles so that you wouldn't have these spots, sort of skin showing. And you're also wearing a balaclava that covers your whole face as well. So you didn't want any skin exposed. So when you needed to go to the bathroom, you wanted to be really fast and really ready. So for a woman, sometimes I would just use the sled or the tent as a wind block, and I would just pull my pants down really quick. Other times I had this, plastic device that you see that women can use that can...
Like a You Go Girls or something?
And mine was this pink plastic one, and it has a little extension tube that can come out of it. So if you have a zipper in the air in your sort of... that you can shove it in there and then have it come out. I actually got good at doing that as well. So I would do both methods depending on what situation I was in.
Did you have to be really aware of, like when I've done some big treks, like in Bhutan. I did a 25-day trek. I've done it twice, the snowman trek.
Totally want to do that.
It's up to, let's go. It's up to 18,000 feet. But at night, I do not want to get out and pee. Like, I just do not. So I have this thing where I won't drink anything for the hour and a half before I get in the tent. And that way I can pee, and then I can just go in the tent, and then I'm not up at all at night.
Oh, yeah.
Did you try to regulate your fluids that way, or were you just like, I have to eat and drink as much as possible to get myself through the day, and I will just deal with...
Yeah, for sure. So in that situation, when we would get back to inside the tent, it was hard to drink enough water during the day because it's just so cold. And so we were always trying to rehydrate. So we were always overhydrating. And we had, what we just labeled pee bottles in the tent. So we just used those, like a Nalgene bottle or a bigger bottle that was just for pee only. And we would pee into those in the night.
So you didn't have to go out.
Exactly, totally.
Okay.
And then you would, the leave no trace kind of standards in Antarctica are outside you dig a hole, a little pit, and that's where you can pour your pee bottle into that, as well as you can take care of your other business out there, and then you just cover it all up.
Yeah. So if you pooping,
yeah,
right.
So then but when you get close to the pole, when you're 60 miles from the pole itself, that becomes a different standard, and you have to then bag your poop and carry the bricks with you until you are done and dispose of them with you. Yeah, they instantly become bricks. This hard bricks.
So just when you think that you're shedding weight because you're putting more in, right. Then you've got the bricks to deal
that's
with.
True. Yeah. So there's that.
And then were you dealing with, guys, you might want to turn this off now or mute it for a minute, but were you dealing with menstruation at that point too?
I was, yeah. I mean, that's something that we don't talk about a lot as women in the outdoors, but that's just something it's natural. Obviously that's going to happen to us, if we're out long enough. So, I had brought tampons, but I also learned about these different kind of reusable cups. So a Diva cup is a silicone cup that I tested and used at home, and thought, well, that would be a great way to have to save on, because of course any tampons, you're going to carry those with you as trash out as well. So that actually was a great device to use. I did have a few incidents where, I had learned how to use it, insert and take it out. But there it was so cold at times that I couldn't get it out. I couldn't get in the position like you would at home, like on a toilet, because I'm just squatting. But I finally figured out how to do it. There was definitely, if you pick up the book, you'll read about some episodes where it was definitely a little trying. And, there's Marty, he's just right there, having to sort of observe this.
Well, at least it wasn't just a friend or a platonic male relationship.
Right. There's definitely some expletives that were shouted out into the wind, that because, your hands are freezing and you're trying to take care of your, hygiene. So that was problematic. And at the same time, I was 48 when I did this. And so I was going through some menopausal kind of body body changes, hot flashes, what's happening. So sometimes at night I'd be in my sleeping bag and I would just be just in a pool of sweat. I mean, and
which does not make sense at all.
No. And then, sometimes during the day you're just, you're insulated every inch of you from the wind. And then all of a sudden a hot flash takes over your body. And anybody who hasn't experienced that before, it's as if, this internal flame starts. It's different for all women, but an internal flame starts that you cannot turn off and you just have to wait it out. And it might be like 30 seconds or a minute, but
Well, then was it dangerous? Because then you would sweat and then, or would it just dry up pretty quickly?
I mean, it could become dangerous if it was like those, but it wasn't as extreme as those night sweats. But mostly what happened for me, and it wasn't dangerous, but I would have to sort of stop and let it end instead of keep skiing, because that almost would make me sweat more. And then that would be difficult. I couldn't let Marty know I'm stopping for a minute. So if I'm following, we would always sort of be in a line. One of us would be navigating, the other was following. If I was the person following, then I would have to try to then catch up. He wouldn't just stop, right? And in most situations, that's fine. It's clear enough. You can see him. But, there was definitely whiteout and foggy days. So that's when I wouldn't stop. I'd have to just keep going.
Anything about that experience that I wouldn't know to ask or that you want to share? Maybe something that's either from the book or just, I mean, it's such a foreign thing to me that I don't even, I think I'm asking a lot of really basic questions. But is there anything there that's like, oh, this would be interesting to listeners? Or do you think that those basics are the interesting part of it?
I think the interesting part is a lot of what is mentally happening to you. When we got done and we were back at that base camp I was telling you about at Union Glacier, there was a climb that had just finished, climbing Mount Vinson, and we were in this mess hall kind of place eating. And this very weathered, experienced guide named Vern Tejas, he was there and he had guided this team. And he heard about that we had just finished. And so he decided to come over and eat dinner with us. And so what was really awesome is that he sat down and he said, you guys did the full expedition from this, by yourselves, no guide. He said, I've guided the last degree, which is 60 miles. And he said, that was hard enough. He said, what you guys did is, I believe, harder than climbing Everest. I mean, Everest has its own challenges, and that it's hard, and it is something that, I haven't done. But he said, from the mental standpoint, you guys, what you did is something to be really proud of, because the day in, day out grind, there's no other people, nobody's doing anything for you, nobody's cooking for you, you have
there's nobody to cry on, there's shoulder to cry on.
I don't think what people realize is that you are stripped down to your bare essence out there. And you'll read these books and you read that these accounts of people talking about that. You're sort of reading it and you're sort of getting, But once you do it, it's facing everything about yourself. It's just everything about it. And you almost can't face it all in the moment because you're in survival mode. So it was through the writing process that I was able to see all of that, and see all the lessons. So that's what I try to put in my book.
You had mentioned early on that ultra running was a preparation for you in terms of that expedition. And was that specifically for the mental capacity for it? Because that's how I look at long distance running, is that I could run all day long physically. Not really, but you know what I mean?
I do.
I could, but I think what breaks people is the mental.
Yes. I think you've hit it. That's what I was trying to articulate as well, is that when you read all these accounts all through the decades, people that are superhuman physical powers, well beyond my husband and I mean, that I would define as much, much greater physical capacity. I mean, guess it's in my own opinion. They didn't make it. And why? Why didn't they make it? And it had to be they were breaking down mentally. And a lot of it is also their teammates. You read a lot about these explorers, and, a lot of them are men. You don't read about a lot of women. And that these men all want to be the alpha. You can't be your best self every day out there. And so you have to go at the pace of the weakest person. And that was breaking these teams apart. They're blaming each other, getting in the tent and just, why are you going so slow? What's your problem? They break down. So the teammate part is just huge. I think I didn't even talk about that, but the fact that I was with my husband, people often are like, oh, I could never go with my spouse for that long and under those conditions. And I couldn't think of anybody else that I would be able to, because we've experienced all of these mental and physical challenges, whether together or on our own, running our own races. We know, we know that where that person is. You can recognize it. You can see. And in those tense moments, we weren't in the blaming game, Do
you want to talk about what's going on right now with Marty?
Yeah, sure. So I sort of alluded to it earlier, in writing this book, it was a 5-year undertaking for so many reasons. And, working and raising my son and learning how to try to write well. But at the same time, there were some other physical things going on. So I mentioned, this literally was the perfect storm. My dad was ill, and ironically, we were dreaming up what we want to do next. And so we had returned.
You and Marty.
Marty and I had we had been home 2 years, and so he said, I don't know, rowing an ocean might sound interesting. And I was like, that does not sound interesting to me, especially now. I'm all about Keenan, my son. So he's like, well, let's get a rowing machine for it. We have a gym in our garage. Let's just get a rowing machine, and that'll be nice cross training. So he got a rowing machine and he starts using it. And, one day he just sort of felt this weird little pull in the clavicle of his shoulder area. And he's like, it feels like there's some little cyst in there or something. And, so he finally got it checked out, and, that's probably a cyst. Let's just biopsy it. And anyway, it turned out that it was cancer. And so that started us on a journey that we are still on. I'll shorten the story. Basically,
when did that take place?
That was in February of 2016. And so, 2016 goes down as our worst year ever, basically. But basically, that sent them looking through his body. Is it anywhere else? And what kind of cancer is this? He had basal cell carcinoma removed, topical cancer, which is a common cancer that people have from the sun exposure. He had that removed in various places, and they thought it was the same, but it was inside his body, which is quite rare for it to go inside. So anyway, through all the scanning and everything, they found suspicious looking lymph nodes in his neck. So they took those out, and those also there was 6 lymph nodes that had cancer in them. Looked like a slightly different version. They still couldn't nail exactly what it was. It's eventually being described as squamous cell carcinoma, which is a different type of skin cancer. So he went through 6 weeks of radiation. And
is it still 2016?
2016. Like a few months later, he goes through that radiation treatment every day, stops off at the hospital on the way home from work, and they just do like a 5-minute zap. And gradually that made him a little more tired over time. But he was still working, exercising, doing everything. So then he sort of got we thought maybe we dodged this, but we knew in the back of our mind, that it was in his lymph nodes. So we just went about our life, and then he went in for a routine checkup like 3 months later, scan, and they said something looked strange in his lungs. Really small, let's just biopsy and see. And so anyway, it turns out that those were cancerous tumors in his lungs, which had spread. It was the same as the ones in his lymph nodes. So he doesn't have lung cancer. He has squamous cell carcinoma
that metastasized
in his lungs. So I just dropped everything. That whole year was basically searching, 6 months of searching for experts who knew this. There wasn't a treatment for this type of cancer. We didn't even know what kind it was at first. Basically, I just put on my we're going to solve this hat, became the project manager of this project. And I cold called experts all over the country, Stanford, Harvard, Mayo, and started building a team of doctors for Marty. So where we are now is he started a immunotherapy treatment, which is really the most promising treatment that's happening in the world of cancer right now. One of the many many exciting things that is happening in the world of cancer. If you're not in that world, you're probably not up on it, but there is a lot of hope right now. So that's really what we hold on to.
What was the original prognosis?
Well, originally it was basal cell carcinoma, and then it was, they didn't know because it had all these other suspicious looking markers on it. So they thought it could be all these other kinds of cancers. And then they just came back to squamous cell and they're not convinced this was maybe the originating point. Luckily, we've got a great team at Seattle Cancer Care Alliance and also a team at Mayo, and they're kind of collaborating together. Wow. And we're making sure that we are on the forefront of any research or anything that is coming along. I mean, when he first was diagnosed, the drug that he took a year later wasn't even FDA approved. So he was taking Keytruda, which has been known to help with melanoma, and he took it for a year. His cancer is very slow growing, and basically it's inconclusive whether that drug worked or not because there's been slow growth. Would it have grown without the drug? So he's been enduring that drug. It basically makes him a little more tired, but the year that he was diagnosed, he ran around Mount Rainier by himself, 95 miles on the Wonderland Trail. He did the rim to rim to rim on the Grand Canyon.
Wow.
I couldn't do it because I had injured my ankle, but two of our friends went with him before he went to Mayo, the day before. He runs from work to his treatment for immunotherapy, the 3 miles each way, every time.
So he's not slowing down.
He is sort of saying, screw you, cancer. I'm going to keep doing this. In fact, I'm going to proudly walk into that Seattle Cancer Care building where people look like they don't have hope. Mm-hmm. And he walks in his running shorts and his, running jacket.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's turning it upside down.
He is, sorry. I'm so proud of him in the way that he has, decided this is not going to, sorry, trying to get words out.
Oh, don't apologize.
This is not going to change who I am at my heart, mm-hmm. at my core. This is not going to change who I am. And I can walk in there and try to give people hope.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I thought I was going to get through the whole story, gosh, but yeah, so it's been a huge ups and downs, but I think the moral of the story for us in our life right now is all that we've learned through all of these decades of being together and going through awesome adventures together is the lessons that we've learned are totally applicable for this situation as well. This is just another challenge that we don't know what the outcome is going to be. When you set out on any adventure, any expedition, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. Mm-hmm. We don't know what our life outcome is going to be. So, mm-hmm. Yeah.
Again, thank you for sharing that. I knew what was going on just from our pre-conversation, and I thought that the important part of that was the fact that he is still planning. And I didn't know, because I know you're doing this race, right, in June. And I just thought, gosh, here's a guy who's not just sitting down and letting things happen to him. He's happening to the world. He's out there.
That's right.
Doing stuff. And you're supporting him. You're doing it together. So he doesn't get all the credit. You get some credit.
Well, right. Yeah. No, we're doing it together. But I mean, for sure. And, I would be lying if I wasn't saying that in some ways it has made it even more urgent to do these things that we always have done anyway. He likes to talk about it as, I don't have a bucket list that I haven't done. I have lived my life doing all the bucket list things. There isn't a bucket list. So when we first got the diagnosis, he was, we really were kind of hopeless, actually. We thought our adventure life and his life was over. And, he said to me on a run, if this turns out to be the worst, I have no regrets. Mm-hmm. I don't have any regrets. I haven't waited till I retired to do the things I've always wanted to do. And we have had the best moments with our son that he will have forever. So, at least we have that peace of mind that we're just continuing on the same path. We're not in a hurry to do something that we never did.
Right. And you're not slowing down.
We're not slowing down.
You're not stopping.
Right. Because, it's so cliche, but now that, he at first was so, I guess, angry. You're like, why would I get this when I am eating right and I'm exercising and I'm doing all the things that should keep me healthy? But the fact of the matter is that these kind of diseases, they don't, they hit anybody. Mm-hmm. And anything can hit anybody.
Bus. We
can walk outside and be hit by a bus, a car, in a car accident. So, it is cliche, but it's just, we can't use all those excuses we use to not just go out and be the person we want to be and do the things we want to do and go after things that sound exciting. We have to just look past those fears. These fears get in our way and we use our everyday life as excuses that, gosh, if a guy with cancer can still work full time and run hard and think of cool adventures to share with his wife and his son.
And run to his treatment center.
I love that. Mm-hmm. I love it. I mean, it's like giving the F-bomb to cancer every second when he does that.
What an inspiration he is to those other people who are there.
Yeah, and they may not know it, but
someone's noticing.
I'm telling you, and you can see the other people. And at first when we were there, it's also, he's so out of place. It's just not his tribe. It's people that are 20 years older than him. There's not a lot of 56-year-old people walking around Seattle Cancer Care Alliance. And the first time I walked in there, I felt like I was suffocating because I couldn't believe I have entered a world that I've never thought hard about. Every person in that building is suffering. Mm-hmm. It's not like you're walking into a hospital. You're walking into a cancer care facility. Every person is suffering. And I've learned to understand suffering in a totally new way. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you again for sharing all that. It's very special and I think really important. I appreciate you going through that emotional part and talking about it because I just think it's so inspirational, incredibly inspirational.
Well, thank you. I hope it is because for a long time Marty was not really wanting to share that story because it's the emotional pain of it is really hard. So
there's a lot of reasons why.
There's a lot of reasons
why not to.
There's a lot of reasons not to, and also, and just coming to. Almost going through all these, stages of grief about who you were and now who you are. And now he's accepted who he is. Mm-hmm. And he wants to inspire people. He wants people to know that no matter what's happening, there's still life to be lived.
Well, not having met him, he's inspired me.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So right there.
Yeah.
Hey, as we wrap up, couple things. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to bring up at this point?
I think we've talked about a lot here.
And I've loved every minute of it too. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
I always end these conversations with asking the guest, what does it mean to you to be bold?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, being bold is being willing to just bravely walk into the unknown and find things that excite and bring you joy that you may never have imagined, but you're willing to be brave and sort of push yourself to places that you may never have imagined were possible.
Well said. Is your book available yet for like a pre-order?
It is. It's actually available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all of the Powell's.
And The Expedition.
The Expedition. Two Parents Risk Life and Family in an Extraordinary Quest to the South Pole. Yeah, that subtitle's a little long.
Yeah, but it explains it. It's great.
It does. And, the author, Chris Fagan. So if you just Google the expedition Chris Fagan, you'll find it.
Great. And I'll link to it in the show notes as
Yeah,
well. Are there other
that.
places where people can find you? Are you on social media?
Yeah, definitely. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter are all the same handle. It's Chris C. Fagan. At Chris C. Fagan. I have an author website. The website is chrisfagan.net. And that is a placeholder. You'll see it now, but it will be up in a couple weeks. So,
great.
Yeah.
Probably by the time this airs.
Awesome.
So it'll be up.
Yeah.
So great.
Perfect.
Gosh, thank you so much for coming out on a gosh darn
It's
gorgeous,
a beautiful day. You can see Mount Rainier out here.
I know. It's great.
I
So
know.
thanks so much for coming out to West Seattle. And I look forward to staying in touch with you and following your journey this summer, too.
Well, thank you. And thanks for having me. I loved talking with you today.
Wasn't that amazing? Chris is so inspiring, and really, she was so much fun to chat with. You can find Chris at 3belowzero.com, and she's Chris C. Fagan on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And that's F as in Frank, A-G-A-N as in Nancy Fagan. For these links and for links to all the things we chatted about in this episode, go to shesboldpodcast.com/episodes, and there you will find the show notes for this and all of my other conversations. You can also find those links and show notes in whatever podcast app it is you're using to listen to this. Don't forget to check out my Patreon page. It is basically a way for you to say, yes, I like what I'm hearing on the She's Bold podcast, and I'm willing to support the show and get some special benefits. When you become a patron, you unlock bonus content such as questions I ask of guests after we complete the episode. So it's a little secret society that we have, and those are fun to listen to. You can find out more by going to shesboldpodcast.com/Patreon. You can connect with me by friending me on Facebook, and I'm WanderGal on Instagram. That WanderGal Instagram account, by the way, is where you'll see my travel photos. And I've just started another Instagram account at BethWhitwa. It's BethWhitwa, where you'll see more personal posts, such as images of me and my travels. You'll see photos of me running and also with podcast guests. Ladies, you can join the Be Bold Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/BeBoldGroup. That is a wonderfully positive place to hang out, get some inspiration and some kudos from other people, and to help them out in their travels and their life by giving them some feedback. Thanks for joining me for another episode of the She's Bold podcast. Until next time, be bold.